like to welcome Duke alumni and friends to this volunteer engagement educational experience in partnership with the Duke Alumni Forever Learning Institute, an interdisciplinary educational program organized in a set of thematic courses. My name is Zach Fisher. I'm the Assistant Director of Volunteer Engagement. Thank you for joining our program today, Getting to Know Your Community. Today's interactive program focuses on the theme of impact in the Lending a Better Hand series, and we'll explore the critical skills and perspective needed in looking to make an impact on your community from a volunteering perspective. Joining us today as our facilitator is Alicia Florwick, Senior Program Coordinator with the Duke Office of Durham and Community Affairs. Welcome, Alicia. For more information around the Duke Office of Durham and Community Affairs, please visit their website at community.duke.edu. Alicia will also provide more contact info at the end of the presentation. Alicia, welcome to this volunteer experience.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you so much. And welcome, everyone. Really excited to engage with you all virtually. We have tons of ways for you to give feedback and engage. So very excited. And I've run this session a few times for folks across Duke's campus. I'm actually also a Duke alum. So woohoo, welcome. But Foundations of Engagement is a workshop reflection, really. It's really not a content delivery. It's more of a reflective workshop that we lead through the Duke Civic Engagement team within our Office of Durham and Community Affairs. And it was a joint collaboration of developing this content between our office and also Duke Service Learning and the Social Science Research Institute at Duke. So I hope you enjoy it. It is really just a way for us to start asking better questions as we're thinking about going out into communities. And so to start us off, I want to frame us just with a little story. So we start with two young fish are swimming through the ocean, and an older fish swims up and says, "Hey folks, how's the water?" And the two fish look at each other, look at the older fish and say, "Oh, great. The water is amazing. Love it. Best water ever." Older fish is satisfied, swims away. Two young fish are swimming along, and then they look at each other, and one says to the other, "What the hell is water?" And this is how we live our lives, right? We are essentially swimming in our own water. We're in our own context and our own experiences that are unique to us and unique to maybe the people who are sharing similar experiences. But it can become invisible to us after a while, and or it can start invisible to us. And then if we're not bringing awareness to it, we might be living in some spaces of bias or assumption that we just don't realize. So that's why we're doing the training at all. That's why we're doing this reflection. So we like to start it by grounding ourselves with a couple of questions, a couple of concepts. So the first one is, we can't always explain why we believe what we believe. So in the chat, if you can, throw in there, how did you learn or how do you know that the Earth revolves around the sun? And I'll give you a second to throw that in there. I'm not going to unpack, but I encourage you to read other people's answers of how they learned that the Earth revolves around the sun or how they know that. So people are looking at different sources, they're looking at school, they're looking at teachers. And yeah, we have a trusted way of getting information. One of them is through school, one of them is through our family, through our communities. And so the real answer, which I did not collect the data for either, is one way is that the shadows of the moon on Venus are measured as the celestial bodies are moving around. And so as those shadows change, they actually can extrapolate that the Earth is revolving around the sun. You're going to have to look up the real details on that later, but that is the general gist of why we know that. But secondly, we also fail to recognize that different perspectives or experiences might not be shared by everyone. So again, I encourage you to throw some examples of this, and I'm going to share one of my own examples of something that I think is a little silly, but was really impactful for me. I grew up in Maryland, And so you all have been down here to Duke, unless you were a virtual student, at Thanksgiving time, which is coming right up, we used to eat pumpkin pie, right? We still do. We eat pumpkin pie. Come down here, it is all sweet potato pie all day. And it's all sweet potato, like I try to get a white potato around here, it is sweet potato. So you can tell I've been here for a little while though, 6 or 7 years. My partner says I'm honorary at this point. So that for me, that was like, what is happening? But sweet potatoes are a cash crop down here. It's a cultural food. It is a thing that shows up all the time. And it was just surprising to me. And that can happen in any context, whether you're moving around or not. Lastly, we are prone to not putting a critical lens on something if we think we're doing a good thing. So the last example here is that there was a study done by Dan Ariely, who is actually a researcher affiliated with Duke. He's a sociologist, and he invited people to come and do a little experiment. So they were given a die, like a just 6-sided die. And they were told, okay, you're going to roll that, and you have to guess whether or not the number on top is higher or lower than the number on bottom, right? So if there was like a 4 on top, it was higher than a 2 on the bottom, right? 50-50 chance. And they would roll the die and they just guess it in their brain. They didn't have to write it down. They didn't have to tell anyone. And if they got it right, they would get $1. So spoiler alert, some people lied. So they figured that out probability wise. Some people lied to get the $1, some lie detector tests afterwards. Some people lied to get the $1. Then they switched it up. They said, okay, instead of you getting the $1, your favorite charity gets the $1. How do you think that changed things? Do we want to do a quick poll in the chat? Did more people lie? Did less people lie? Or was it about the same? Okay, we got one more line. Increased. Okay, faith in humanity, low. It was, in fact, more, I feel like this is, only a few people have, but this is like the consensus. Yes, more people did lie. And when they did a lie detector test, actually, afterwards, to kind of confirm in multiple ways that people were lying, they actually found that the people who they eventually figured out did lie actually passed the lie detector test because they were so justified in the reason why they were lying to get that $1 to charity. And so, maybe we can't even measure harm in that scenario. Maybe it's just a moral harm for that person. But it really illustrates that a lot of people are willing to kind of skirt past ethical reflection to get to that thing that they think is really good. And that can cause harm. And so what does harm actually look like there? What does harm look like in our context here? So a sociologist named Becky Bach did a study on Duke's campus where she asked community partners to reflect on their experiences with Duke students. So I'm going to show you some things around Duke students, but I will let you know that we have heard from our partners similar feedback about faculty, staff. We also know that this is not a Duke problem only. Institutions tend to have this issue. But here's some of the feedback, and I just want you to look at it. And this isn't across the board. There are positive experiences as well that people have had. But I just want to highlight the harm that can happen, the relational harm, the ways we cannot be partnering effectively with people, the ways we're alienating people if we're not reflecting and we're just convinced we're doing good. So what we're hoping for with this session is to start asking some better questions so we can be better partners. So the objectives for today are to think about partnership. How are we aligning with folks? How are we meeting folks where they are at in their own communities and in the ways that they want to build and grow? And also, how are we thinking about the entirety of an issue, right? So not just, hey, these folks don't have enough food, but why don't they have enough food? And what is my appropriate response in that full context? So we'll jump in. We will start off with partnership. So how should I go about doing service? And we're going to use an activity from that we have gotten permission to borrow from the Community Empowerment Fund. If you haven't seen that organization, you should definitely look them up. They're wonderful. But essentially, it's going to be a town that is real in North Carolina that we are fictionally calling Nober, just to keep it from being distracting. During this activity, we're going to do some breakout sessions. We're going to use some technology. And so know that after we get out of the breakout sessions, I will show you how to do the technology. But I just wanted you to be prepared for that. But to start us off, we will begin our discussion with this description of Nober. So this is a needs assessment. We're going to go right off of those questions and do a bit of a debrief, but I want to introduce you to the technology that we'll use. You can do this in your web browser or on your phone. The QR code is preferred for your phone through your camera. So open your camera and focus on the QR code, and you should get the website link to press on. Or you can access the website as shown here and do the join code. The first debrief question is, which words or phrases describe Nober? So when you all were discussing in your groups, just what came up for you all in the beginning? Seeing the word cloud kind of come up, right? Under-resourced, economically disadvantaged, a lot of people thinking impoverished. The bigger the word, the more people put that word in. Left behind. Overall, a pretty bleak picture of Nober, I would say, right? Looks like they are in need of a few things. That needs assessment really gave us the idea that they need economic help. There's economic depression or just emotional depression, overall poor with lack of opportunity. So pretty tough. So with that perspective, thinking about our impressions of Nober, what I'd like you to do is think about how you would partner with Nober. And so how this activity works is you put your idea of how you'd like to partner in. You can type it in. Yeah, I see people typing. Wonderful. You can type in your idea. It'll show up to everyone. So be mindful of that. And then next, everyone who's participating on the app is able to vote on their favorites. So if we get a ton of answers, just go ahead and pick the ones that you're like, oh my gosh, yes, I love that idea of partnership. And then we'll discuss briefly afterwards. So we'll use this type of technology a couple times, which is why I wanted to explain it. How would you partner? And that is in that sense of trying to be solutions oriented, in this sense of service, in the sense of joining with communities. How would you partner? So I'm going to give you all about 30 more seconds to type in your answers, because I see people still typing. So go ahead and get it in there, and then we'll move to the next. We'll vote on some favorite suggestions. All right, still typing, but 10 more seconds. I'm going to move to voting. It's okay if you didn't get your suggestion in. Go ahead and vote on the ones that you think are the best. I believe you have 3 votes you can cast. And you'll see it's really cool. It'll cluster after you do your votes. And we'll look at the top 3. So I'll give you all about 30 seconds or so again, just to go through and pick your top 3. And I am watching your engagement. If you're panicking and you're like, oh, I have to vote. It's okay, I'll wait. But let's look at the voting results. All right, what are the top 3 here? So Caitlin's suggestion, meet with community leaders to learn more about the community. Wonderful. Robin, visit and ask community members what they would like to see in for their town. Love it. PJ, connect with some people or with some of the people and determine what they actually need. Get the information directly from them and then work from there. I am so thrilled that those clustered to the top, because I really feel like those suggestions live in the spirit of partnership. And so I want you all to kind of hold that in mind, these suggestions in mind, and feel free to scroll through the other suggestions as well, what people said, get ideas of what your peers are saying. But we're going to move on to another perspective of NOPR, which I think that, given the voting and the commentary, you all will really appreciate. There's another way of looking at this is through an asset map. And so I want you to do the same thing again, read through this description, and we will break you out into groups. If you're not able to join a breakout group because you're in another meeting or doing another thing, I get it. Feel free to come on for the engagement afterwards in the debrief. The link to the Google document is in the chat for this content that you can look at with your breakout groups, and you'll have 3 or 4 minutes to look at the discussion questions at the bottom of this asset map and discuss, and we'll come back and debrief. So we'll go ahead and break you out, and you'll have 4-ish minutes. See everybody coming back in. Wonderful, wonderful. So let's go ahead and debrief again now that we've had some discussion time. I hope that you all had fruitful conversations, and I would love to hear about them. So first things first, how did your conversation change, if at all, in looking at this new type of description of NOPR? And so again, you'll write in your submission, give you a little time to do that. And then you'll go ahead and vote. We'll talk about the top 3. And again, you have 3 votes. You don't have to use them all, but go ahead and pick your 3 faves. Okay, it looks like we got Chuck, Sponge, Paul, and PJ. So Chuck said, completely different lens and data to inform our discussion, got a sense, got their belonging and civic muscle. Very cool. So you kind of got this idea of this narrative of the civic belonging, belonging to the area, civic engagement, and a lot more data, which is not what people would necessarily count narratives as, but narratives and storytelling around communities is very much data. And you can see it's very productive. So Paul said an interest to find solutions internally, not needing or wanting to change to be like bigger cities. Yeah, so you got to feel for how they actually want to develop and they want to grow, right, as a community. And all of those things that you all, really loved in the beginning of saying, like, I wish I knew more. I wish I knew more about what these people wanted within their own communities. You're getting that here, and you're able to build off of that, which is wonderful. Again, BJ reiterating that this is the information we needed to move forward if we really wanted to center with communities. Wonderful. So what strengths did you see when you were thinking about NOPR? You all were talking about they have awesome stuff going on. There's so much positive conversation to have about NOPR. What were the strengths that really jumped out at you that you'd be excited to build off of? Which ties into the partnership thing, right? If we're building off strengths, what does that partnership look like? So feel free to just kind of put in your ideas here. I will remember to scroll for the folks that are not jumping onto the AHA slides. Yeah, and feel free to name details. Is there something in there that you were like, oh, we could work with that? All right, so I'm gonna take us to the voting. Pick your favorite 3. What do we got? Well, LNH, MZ, and John, congratulations. You were the most popular answers. LNH said, strong sense of community activism and determination with follow through. Love it. Follow through. Oh, these are clustered differently than mine. MZ, LNH, and John. Ability to organize and work together, investment in infrastructure and education, shared history, and sense of community. Yes. I think shared history is something that is really emergent and is hard to see a lot of times when you're entering into communities for the first time. And then leadership, problem solvers, actively seeking state resources. So they're doing a lot of things already, and they have a lot of skills. Last thing, maybe we'll just think on this, and then I'm going to move us to the next activity, but I want you to just kind of sit with the idea of where you would find this information. Where would you find narrative? And where would you find specific things happening in community? And where would you learn about the history of community? Give you a second to think on it. Interviews with town leaders. Honestly, it's talking to people, right? It's that element of actually talking to people and getting to know people in the community. So I cannot stress enough the idea of relationship. And to round us out, just want to bring home the idea of power, right? So we're really just comparing needs versus assets. And what we want to bring home is this idea of where power lies when we are focusing on assets versus needs. When we're thinking about building on those strengths, which includes understanding the narrative and history of a community, versus focusing on that scarcity, on the numbers, on the poverty. And so as you go out and partner with communities, really just take that with you. Think about, how are we building from within? And how are we thinking about working with folks where they're at so that we can have sustainable and wonderful, fruitful partnerships? I'm going to jump us into our last activity, because we're not just thinking about how we partner, but we're thinking about why the need for partnership has arisen in the first place. So our last activity is going to have us thinking a little bit more about root cause and thinking expansively about how social issues even occur in the first place and how we engage with those. So for this, we're going to break down a couple of really simplistic stories. They're two parable-ish stories to help us start to use those themes to think about more complex topics in our lives. Now, the first story is a starfish story. I normally have my my participants read these stories out loud, but I'm going to go ahead and read these to you. We'll start with the starfish story. So one day, a man was walking along the beach when he noticed a boy hurriedly picking up and gently throwing things into the ocean. Approaching the boy, he asked, "Young man, what are you doing?" The boy replied, "Throwing starfish back into the ocean. The surf is up and the tide is going out. If I don't throw them back, they'll die." The man laughed to himself and said, "Don't you realize there are miles and miles of beach and hundreds of starfish? You can't make any difference." After listening politely, the boy bent down, picked up another starfish, and threw it into the surf. Then, smiling at the man, he said, "I made a difference to that one." So hold that one in your mind. I'm sure you've heard that before. If you haven't, welcome to the starfish story. And we're going to compare that with another story. So we're calling this one the story of the river kittens. One summer in the village, the people in the town gathered for a picnic, and they leisurely shared food. As they leisurely shared food and conversation, someone noticed a kitten in the river, struggling and crying. The kitten was going to drown. Someone rushed to save the kitten, and then they noticed another screaming kitten in the river, and they pulled that kitten out. Soon, more kittens were seen drowning in the river, and the townspeople were pulling them out as fast as they could. It took great effort, and they began to organize their activities in order to save the kittens as they came down the river. As everyone else was busy in the rescue efforts to save the kittens, two of the townspeople started to run away along the shore of the river. "Where are you going?" shouted one of the rescuers. "We need you here to help us save these kittens. We are going upstream to stop whoever is throwing them in." And I would love for you all to discuss keeping those stories in mind. I hope you can kind of hold them in your mind. These 4 questions, thinking about what resonates for you, what you can think of comparatively in society, how nonprofits work, what are the limitations, and we'll give you really a brief time because we're going to come back and debrief as a group again. So probably about 3 or 4 minutes again. We'll go ahead and break you out. Okay, welcome back from your rapid rejoining. I hope that you all had wonderful conversations. So let's discuss. Let's figure out, first of all, which best represents you. I would love to know if you see yourself, and I'm going to unlock that submission. I would love to know if you see yourself as a starfish or a runner up the river or both. Like saying below. I have a feeling because I do this session a lot with students as well, and they are sometimes feeling one or the other, but not both. And I think it's fun and interesting that most of our participants today are feeling kind of in the realm of both, even though you don't have to. Don't feel bad if you're feeling in one square space or not. All right. Most people thought they were both. Why? Okay. We've got personal connection. I love that. I think globally but act locally. So I'm a starfish because I'm acting locally. Really depends on the situation for Debbie. Really like to feel like you're fixing things. Act local, think global. Sometimes there are opportunities to make quick, immediate impact. Other times there are chances to do things long-term and sustainably. Yeah, so it really depends on the situation. Right. So people have a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it kind of has to do with their work. Sometimes it kind of has to do with where they're traveling, what they're doing, who they're engaging with. So that's why as you get older, sometimes it's a little more complicated. Sometimes it feels like both. In the context of you thinking about both, right? And you thinking about the real world, where you're at with work, feeling like you're systemically working on things and getting handed to you, feeling like, if I'm traveling and I can really affect a policy issue, you have a lot of experience. So what are some of the limitations of these stories? Because they're pretty simple, right? What are your ideas around this? Where do they lack? Where does it just not hold up in real life? I will give us another 30 seconds-ish. I see answers coming in. People are really thinking about this one. So let's go ahead and get a few up there. And then we'll move to a quick vote and we'll kind of just debrief a couple of the bigger ones. So what do you think are the best ones? I know I didn't give everybody enough time, but that's okay. This is just for practice. It's okay. Life is never that simple. No, it is not. No, it is not. We can talk about that a little bit more. Available length of time for engagement, right? So, you could go a lot of ways with that one. And then ability to engage volunteers. So many causes, small pool of willing resources, right? There's not usually volunteers available. There's not people sitting by the river just waiting to engage. There's not just, people aren't starfish, for instance. People aren't kittens. You're not just going to pick people up and throw them back into an ocean. Dialogue is a thing. So there are a lot of reasons why these stories maybe don't mirror real life and why we would want to think a little bit more deeply. I had a what else question, and I'd love for you to journal about that later. But I want to move us into a final reflection where we're thinking about, okay, we've got thinking about people's strengths, partnering and aligning with people, thinking about how to engage sustainably in a way that is really respectful and really effective. And then also thinking about root cause versus point of service and how complicated that can be and situational that can be. So what I'd love is for you all just to share in our last 30 seconds, because we are jumping in there on time, is what is one thing you learned today? And so you can write it down for yourself. You can share it here. In fact, I think we might need to write it down for ourselves in our journals. But I want you to try to just pull away, because without reflection, there is no learning. I love that. So no saviors, think about assets. I think that is a wonderful way to end. And I appreciate and thank you all so much. And I hope that you're taking some of this away and really reflecting on it. But I also, if you have more questions, you can also contact our office. There's our email, doce@duke.edu. It's always difficult to have full conversations in an hour. But thank you so much.